Hey guys, so as some of you may know, MoThoughts is different from MoLife. MoLife is a lot to do with the mindset and life coaching and lessons and sessions. Whereas my MoThoughts, that's when you get to know me personally. These are stories, sometimes secrets, that I'm willing to talk about because I think they're important to understand not only how I have evolved and changed and how you can get there too, but to understand we've all have our unique obstacles or struggles or pivot points. And maybe my stories, my thoughts, might be similar to yours, and we're able to connect on a completely different level. So there's been a memory that has been resting on my mind for some time. Actually, you can consider a trigger up till recently, where I wrote it down as a letter and forgave the individual in a letter for how unkind they were to me. And I've done this a few times, and this is something in my Mo Life sessions I'll teach you. Letters of forgiveness. You get it out on paper, and if it's so negative it just tarnishes our soul, we burn it. But if it's a forgiveness letter where we are also part we were also part of the problem and we're forgiving ourselves as well as the actions as well as the situation, I encourage you to keep those, because occasionally when those triggers happen, it's important to look back on those letters and be like, oh, remember you forgave yourself. Remember these words of forgiveness to yourself, to the situation, to the others involved. So this is one of those letters where it's kind of a mix. Yeah. You see, growing up, actually always, my personality is very flirtatious. I'm a people pleaser. I think we've already established that by the fact that I love the spotlight and I love my fans, and I was completely under an adrenaline rush of being in the modeling industry. Well, this was way before. Even in high school and even in middle school, I was a little bit of a flirt. Now, I never took actions on my flirt, but I had a lot of guy friends because I was very flirtatious. I had a lot of guy friends. Now, some of the guy friends probably wanted to sleep with me. Not trying to be cocky there, but they're dudes 15, 16, 17 years old. Okay? Some of them are genuinely were my brothers. And I've always had guy friends. It was really difficult for me to have girlfriends. And I never felt I could really connect to a girl. Guys, we could talk sports still. I could still be a tomboy, yet still be girly. But with girls, there was always this pressure with being girly and being up to date with trends and style. Or simply, with girls, there was always this push of comparison. And I just didn't like that. So nonetheless, I've always had guy friends. Always, even into my 20s and now into my 30s, I still have guy friends. I still have brothers that I speak to oftenly. There's this a particular event that was a pivot point for me. You see, back in the day, I was very much involved in my church. I'm not going to name the church, nor name the people in the situation, but I was very involved. I took my duties in my faith and within my church very seriously. So, for example, I was an acolyte for the church I was with. They caused to be considered an usher. Nonetheless, I wore robes and I helped the priest throughout the service, whether it was with communion or prayers of the people or walking the crucifix down the aisle. I took that job really seriously. On top of that, I was really into my youth group. I loved my youth group. It was my family. You know, as I mentioned before, I lost my father when I was 11 years old. And so my youth group has always been my family. It was a part of me. It was that excitement that every evening on a Sunday at 5 p.m. I would go to youth group and I got to see a lot of my friends. I got to be silly, sometimes flirtatious, and be part of something. And then on top of that, I was really into mission trips. So yes, I was very faith driven. I follow the church, very much so. I was dedicated. That all changed when I was about 17 years old. And it's something that still haunted me into my 20s. See, I'm even tearing up about it. How could someone who was so dedicated to the church, to youth group, be so verbally abused and bullied by an individual who you looked up to? See, we changed youth ministers sometime in like my early high school years. We went from one to another, and at first it was fine. At first, everything was fine. At least I thought it was. But then, I started getting verbally abused by this particular youth minister. I started being told, or even just suggested, that I was sleeping around with the other youth boys in the youth group. Matter of fact, the word slut didn't come far from the truth of what was expressed to me. You don't need to be slutting it up in my youth group. Seriously? Yes, I'm a little flirtatious, but I'm still a virgin. And yes, I was still a virgin till after high school. Not till I was a freshman in college. Because that's how dedicated I was to the church. Now some could come back and say, yeah, but dedication to the church also means you keep your virginity till marriage. Well, guess what? I waited till college. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. I was out of high school drama before I had sex. Proud. In this particular incident, though, this is when I started pushing away from the church. I was 17 years old. We just finished a mission trip to a third world country, and yes, there was a little bit of romance with one of the young dudes, but who doesn't have a little romance when you're 17 and you're the blondest girl there and the whitest girl there, blonde and white with bright green eyes. But my reactions the day we left was completely miscommunicated. You see, the day we left, I sobbed. I was just heartbroken to leave. Now, for the youth minister, he started a rumor that I sobbed because I was in love with one of these men. Boys, nonetheless. They weren't even men. Boys. Teenage boys. But the real truth was, I wasn't sobbing over a teenage boy. That wasn't like me. You see, I grew close to a young girl. She was about 6 or 7 years old, named Margarita. And this little girl followed me around for almost 2 weeks. 10 days. And we became so close. And all I wanted to do was bring her home. I wanted to be a young mom to her. Believe it or not, I wanted to bring her home and be a mom to her. Leaving that country, knowing the crime rate, the human trafficking rate in this country, I knew the odds were against her. And I was only hoping for the best. I was only hoping my faith would get me through and that she would still be safe. That's what I was crying about that day. Leaving a little girl. And it's because of this particular moment of tearfully sobbing, leaving this young little girl behind, that to this day, I do plan eventually to adopt a young girl who comes from a poverty-driven lifestyle. It doesn't have to be from a third world country. We have those problems here in the States. But this was just the start for me in this experience with this youth minister. I come to find out he not only told others, he also told the priest at my church. Shortly after, in the fall, I was taken aside by him and told that I should never come back to youth group. That the place that I have called family since I was 11 years old, I should not come back to. Because I had turned into a, quote, whore, a slut. With no evidence, just looking at my flirtatious personality. He considered that I was sleeping with all the boys in the youth group. This is then, in this moment, I would lose my faith. I actually stopped going to church. I refused to go to church. Matter of fact, at this time I had my own car, and so it got to the point my mother would go to the church I grew up in, and I would go down the street to another church, a more contemporary, non-denominational church that took me in as family. It was because of that church I started to gain my faith back a year later. And it's because of that church today I gained the faith to understand all faiths, to be a peacemaker because of that undenominational church. But why tell you this story? I tell you this story as a reminder, what we may see is not always what is being, what actions are taking place. What we see is not always the truth. Little did this youth minister know that before his little verbal abuse started months before this mission trip and then continued after the mission trip, that in my middle school years, I was very bullied. That was a really hard time. You talk about a girl who just lost her father and then being severely bullied on top of it at school daily, 5 days a week, being isolated and the outcast and the black sheep, yet grieving and trying to figure out who she was. And then on top of that, you add maturing and going through puberty. I mean, God, those 3 years were not my favorite. I never want to go back. They shaped me to not take bullshit, abso-freaking-lutely. But what that youth minister didn't know is his bullying few years later, was similar. Not similar, but had me recognize how weak I was. Him bullying me was a trigger of being bullied at that same place from middle school. Maybe I had a lot of guy friends because I lost my dad young. Maybe I had a lot of guy friends because I was the youngest in my family. I was considered the only child because all of my siblings were older. And maybe I had a lot of guy friends because I genuinely just wanted big brothers. I wanted to feel protected. I didn't have a dad anymore, though I know he was a guardian. He wasn't around. And having guy friends was my way of feeling protected. No, I didn't sleep around. It took years for me to forgive this situation. It took years. Literally years to the point of studying to be a life coach for me to accept and forgive this individual. Because the other story that I don't tell you is about a year and a half-ish later. I think it was maybe even 2 years later, to be exact. Timeline doesn't really matter. When you're young, timelines kind of just mesh together anyways, year after year. You're going through a lot as is. I was at a superstore buying some baby items for a baby shower for a family member. I run into this particular youth minister again with his new wife. And instead of asking about a baby shower or asking who it's with, they assume in public that I am pregnant. Yeah, in public. They assumed the baby items in my cart were for me. They just assumed I was gonna be a teenage mom. That struck a chord too. Like, wow, you really look less than me. But what do we get out of this, guys? What do we really get out of all of this? Is it that what you see is not always what you get? Is it what you see is what you want to see and you don't ever see the truth of an individual? Or is it simply this? What did I learn from that experience? What did I learn? Oh, that's right. You're so right. I learned others people's opinions don't matter. I learned bullshit is bullshit. I learned I'm going to keep going and do me because your opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion on me is small as a mouse, as small as a grain of rice. That's what you should think too. Those opinions of you out there are just opinions. They're not who you are. If you can look yourself in the mirror every day and be like, you know what, I'm a bad ass. I've worked hard. I am who I am. I am happy for being the individual I am. Then who else cares? Since then, because of my other lovely stories and life lessons of my mistakes and my wrongdoings and my unique paths in my 20s, there are times I have been told I am a porn star. I will always be one, supposedly. That's not who I am. That's their opinion. Because they don't want to see the growth. They don't want to see who I've evolved to be. They don't want to see that I'm out there speaking my words, speaking my memories, speaking my secrets out loud for the world to hear, and being the best version of myself and helping others be the best version of themselves. They don't see any of that. They don't want to see the person who's evolved. They just want to see who they want to see. And that's how they're always going to be. Remember that. That is who they're always going to be. Just like this youth minister. To this day, I have run into this individual a few times over the years. And each time, I recognize my success, my growth, the woman I become means nothing to this individual. Means very little. Because all they see is what they would have called, when I was 17, the slutty little whore that was in their youth group. That's all they're going to see. Even at 30. They're not going to see anything else. But I have accepted that. That letter of forgiveness I talked about does wonders. But what could I have done differently then? I look back on that. Because remember, I said in the beginning, it was still like a mixed situation. But was it? What could I have done differently? Not been so flirty? Not been so optimistic, loud, and proud? Not been so confident? Guess what? I'm still all those things. Yeah. I still have a very flirtatious attitude towards things. I'm still loud. I'm still proud. I'm with you here. I'm still optimistic and I'm still very confident. And I thank my mother and father for that daily. It's because of them I am confident today. So if anything you get out of my story today is those little voices that try to tear you down, that try to put a title on you, it means nothing at the end of the day. It means nothing. You continue to be you. You find what makes you tick and makes you happy and brings you joy. You continue to be you. And the good people who love you and support you will always surround you. Those other little toxic minds out there, they're always going to be that way. But it's up to you if you really want to take the heat and get punched in the face metaphorically with their words, or stand up and smile and say, I'm so sorry you think of me that way. I felt like I need to pray for you. Or, I'm sending you good vibes and energy. I'm so sorry you feel that way about me, but seriously, I send you good vibes. And I hope your day gets better. Don't let that screw up your mindset. Don't let negative people, toxic people screw up your mindset. And I know I preach this daily, but it's so true. Don't let others bring you down. Once they bring you down to their level, they feel like they have won. Don't allow it to happen. Just speak louder. Speak prouder. And if you can avoid the situation, walk away. You don't have to say anything back. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. Your self-worth is everything to you. It is your inner power. Be amazing. Be amazing. Be amazing as an introvert. Be amazing as an extrovert. Be amazing as a nurse, a teacher, a mother, a father. Be amazing in your own bubble, in your own universe. I believe in you. Just how you believe in me to tell you these stories weekly about what certain circumstances in my life changed me, made pivot points in my life. Little did this youth minister know, I always wanted to be a youth minister. Matter of fact, I planned to be on a youth minister from the time I believe I was about 10 years old. I wanted to make an impact. But guess where I am now, guys? I'm bigger than a youth minister. I'm a life coach with a published book and another book coming next year. I'm bigger than a youth minister now. I can speak my truth and help others. What? That's amazing. One tiny hiccup, one tiny bump in the road brought me to here? What? We all need to celebrate and pop champagne over this. It can do that for you too. Someone tells you, you know what, you don't have the strength or the mindset to be in the military. Go show them. You know what? You're not going to be a great artist. Go show them. You know what? I don't see you as a nurse. You just don't seem like that kind of person that can handle blood. Go show them. Anytime someone pulls you down, it's because they're in such a low place in their life. They want others around them that they can continue to bring down. What gives them energy. So instead of going to their level, like I've said, go show them. You don't think I can be a nurse? Well, guess what? I'm going to go be a doctor instead. You don't think I'm going to be an artist? Well, guess what? I have 2 #1 hits and 3 albums. What? Do you? Show your passion. Give yourself credit. Be human. And allow this to be one of your greatest powers of yourself. This mind right here. Have a beautiful day and continue to be the most brilliant version of yourself. I'll be here always.